Hello, and welcome to the Caregiver from Love podcast. My name is Daniel Martinez Stahl, and today what I wanted to talk about is the saying that came to me in my sleep, which was commit to what is real. And how does this relate to being a caregiver? Well, a lot of the things that I've learned over the last number of years is to really go deeper into understanding the relationship of what I am giving meaning to, what I am focused on, and the role that that plays in the creation of my experience and in the state of mind that I am living in moment by moment. As caregivers, as a caregiver, let me speak for myself. One of the biggest challenges is in always being on call. My mother goes to sleep quite late at night, and I will typically try and stay awake a little bit longer so that I have a little bit of time in the day where it is my time and she's sleeping. I don't need to worry about her. I know she's not going to need anything at that point, usually. But it's kind of like my little time. Even now, I've told her that I'm going to be on this call and that she can interrupt if she needs, because this is somewhat informal. Um, when I go shopping and I leave the house, I know that she can call me at any point in time and I need to drop what I'm doing and drive back and help her out. So there's no downtime, generally speaking. This idea of committing to what is real is reminiscent of, and I mentioned this in the blog article that I wrote. Um, it's reminiscent to what the council refers to, the council channeled through Sarah Landon. What the council oftentimes will remind us of, which is to be impeccable. And I know that different people have different meanings for that. And in my personal opinion, some of them get a little distorted. But I can only speak for myself, my journey, my experience, my ideas, my thoughts. Being impeccable, living an impeccable life, is more of a direction that I point myself towards. It's an intention because I am still not living in a place of my expanded awareness where I am living from a place of love all the time, 100% of the time. And I still don't know if that's even possible. However, what I have learned, and I do believe, is that when our human gets caught up in other people's stories, we can still stay conscious of a broader perspective, which allows us to be in a peace of mind regardless of whatever our beautiful human is caught up in. And so when my mother frustrates me or drives me nuts or says things that irritate me and I lose my patience, there's a couple of things that I do. First of all, I don't hold on to that. As much as I can, as best as I can, I let things go. I don't hold on to, oh, she keeps on doing this, she keeps on saying this. When I get frustrated and I move on, I move on. It's behind me. I don't hold on to it. I don't linger with it. I don't hold on to that energy. Again, as best as I can. So being impeccable for me is about being as clean as we can with the meaning and attention we are giving to the thoughts that are popping into our head or the thinking that we are creating about those thoughts. And the cleaner we are in our, that's not even the right word, because there's a perception in that word. The more aware we are of how we are utilizing our thoughts and our thinking, and the more understanding we have with regards to how that creates our experience of life, the easier it is for us to maintain a state of mind which is expansive and allowing of more than our perception of our current experience. That just sounded really complicated. Sorry. But that's how it came out. um, so, committing to what is real. As I mentioned in my blog article, if you haven't already read it, you can go to my website and go to the blog section and you can find it there. If I remember, I'll add it to the description of this episode, just to kind of link it back. Anyway, as I mentioned in the article, the idea, at least the top level idea of committing to what is real, is pointing me to really focus on not lingering on the past and not speaking about past stories. And the reason that this is so prevalent in my mind is because, as I've mentioned at the start of, I think I mentioned it at the start of episode 1, I was inspired to create this podcast partly because I got into a very heated conversation with some of my family members. And as I reflected on that conversation, what was said and how I responded, what I said, what I felt, as I reflected on all of that, a lot of the things that were coming to mind were things that I quote unquote utilize in my day-to-day with excuse me. Sorry about that. It's a lot of things that I utilize in my day-to-day with my mother. And so I thought, because I'd already been invited by Spirit, channeling through a friend of mine, Shannon Johnson, who some of you know if you've been following me for a while, that I should write a book about my journey as a caretaker. And I have no interest in that, to be honest with you. At least at this point, I have no interest in writing a book about this theme. However, in the aftermath of this conversation with my family members, as I was reflecting on things, I thought, well, hey, I could talk about these things. And the birth of this podcast came about. And so as I'm speaking to you about this, I'm trying to connect the dots. So let me get back to that. Committing to what is real. A lot of the things that I was being accused of referred to stories from things that I did or things that I said in the past. And my family members are holding on to those stories as if those stories are real. Now, I recognize and I realize that our past is real, but our past is no longer real now. The only thing that allows us to live in the past is when we go back to the stories that we have in our head about our past, which are always our interpretation of what happened. In hypnotherapy, we learn how malleable our memories are. We've all had experiences where people will remember things differently than the way you remember them, even though you were both present at the same event or were part of the same conversation. And so people will remember what they want to remember, what their interpretation gives meaning to and importance to, and how their own meaning and importance and beliefs over time then shift that memory, whether they're conscious of it or not, and myself included. I'm not I'm not saying I'm different from that. I'm saying that we're all like this. And so stories become really, really important to understand. And I want to write an article about this. I want to go deeper into this whole idea of stories. And I may I may even do another conversation about stories. But I do want to bring it up here because this is what commit to what is real means to me. Give me a second. Moisturizing spray. My throat feels very dry right now. Not sure why. Some of you are probably going to say that it has to do with my throat chakra or that I've got spirits nearby that are wanting to speak through me. Possible, but we'll keep this simple for now. So stories, going back to stories. Commit to what is real. Committing to what is real is about focusing your attention on the now, right here, right now. Not what happened yesterday, not what happened 5 days ago, not what happened a week ago, not what happened a year ago, not what happened 5 years ago. Now, of course, we utilize our beautiful memory to help us make decisions on how we want to move forward in our lives. And so it's not about discounting our memories. Again, for me, it's about understanding how the system works. And then that understanding allows me to choose with my free will what I want to pay less attention to and what I want to pay more attention to. Shortly after the heated conversation with my family members, needless to say, my mind was very charged, my emotions were very charged, and the thoughts of what was said and what I was accused of and what I wasn't being understood or heard or even respected kept on popping in my mind. And as I reflected on it all, I started getting information from my past that helped to shed light on the relationship in question. From my perspective, from my point of view, because that's all I have. And I wrote this really long response to the family members involved, letting them know these are the things that are coming to me as a result of this conversation. You guys said this. Here's some information that might be of interest to you. And in my emotional charge, it felt like they were throwing rocks from glass houses. And so I was presenting information to show them the house from which they were throwing their rocks from. Very justified on my side. If people knew this, then they would understand that it isn't as simple as just this or that. That there's a long history in our relationship. And I'm not even going to go into the details of it in case they ever hear this, because I may not reveal this to them, because ultimately it doesn't matter. And this goes back to this message that popped in my head while I was sleeping. And so it wasn't in a dream. A friend of mine asked me the question about this. It wasn't in a dream. I heard a voice in my head very clearly. It's a male voice that speaks to me. I've heard his voice a few times. And the voice said, commit to what is real. And so I woke up and I wrote it down because I knew that my mind would alter the language, only commit to what is real, commit to what is real to you in the moment, and then I would forget what was the actual words. And so I reflected on that. And I spoke to my mom about it and I said, hey, by the way, I just got this message. And initially, superficially, top level, which is what I wrote about in the article, for me, it's about recognizing this idea that we're not living in the past and we're not living in the future. We're living in the now. And the more that we commit to the now, the less caught up we become in our stories of what we're afraid of, what we're worried about might happen, our stories of some potential future. And I'm using this kind of negative approach on purpose. It can also be a positive future that we're creating. That tends to have a different effect on us, which is the reason that I'm focusing on the negative a little bit. Um, and or focusing on the stories of the past that we are holding on to, resentments and unforgiven things, and etc., etc., etc. When we hold on to these aspects of the past and the future that don't feel good to us, first and foremost, our emotions don't feel good to us when we are misaligned from the truth of who we are. This is the language from Abraham Hicks or something similar. And again, this is something that I am learning for myself more and more clearly. I'm aware of the time. I'm going to try and keep this to about 30 minutes. I've been going for a little under 20 minutes now. So I'm going to try and keep this short. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. So our stories that we hold on to, that we then bring back into our moment, into our present, into our now, especially the ones that don't feel good, our human needs to feel those emotions for us to experience that memory. And when we assign meaning when we assign meaning to a memory, and that meaning is a meaning of something that doesn't feel good, of resentment of some sort, of something that we haven't forgiven others for, again, we're bringing that energy back into our body in order for us to experience that memory and to think about it and to reflect on it. Now, I find the word reflect versus think being more positive because I can reflect on my past without necessarily engaging in the story of it. So I like the word reflect. Now, if I reflect on something in the past and I start to engage in the story, it, for me, is no longer a reflection, and it actually turns into me buying into the story and then getting all emotionally upset and impatient and hurt and angry and disappointed. And sometimes that's what my human needs and that's what my human wants. And so, again, no judgment about what happens and how I choose to buy into things. My human is designed to buy into the stories because this is part of the human experience. And so I'm always going to buy into stories. I'm going to buy into my stories. I'm going to buy into my mother's stories. I want to buy into my family's stories. I'll buy into my friends' stories. I'll buy into your stories. My human is designed to buy into stories so that we can experience this life on earth as if it's real. And again, there's a lot of talk about the reality of this experience, that this is a projection from our consciousness, that we are projecting our experience from our consciousness, our spiritual consciousness. And everything around us is a projection from our own energy. Now, for all intents and purposes, as far as I'm concerned, if we are alive on this planet, this is a real experience. Now, the more that we start to understand the broader picture of how the system works and the broader picture of what is real, it allows us to have a different perspective on the stories that we're getting caught up in. And it allows our human to release the catch up more easily, to let go of that attachment more easily. Commit to what is real. And I haven't really spoken about this. Again, it plays into this idea of what is real. And the more that we understand the interrelationship between our soul, our spirit, our higher self, whatever terminology you want to play with, and our human, and the relationship between both that allows us to have the experience that we're having, the more we get to play with this nebulous word of what is real. We get to play with, well, what is real is my experience in the moment, and my experience in the moment is shaped by what I am focused on and the meaning that I'm giving it. What is real in the moment comes from my own investment in my imagination, which is another dimension of experience, which is equally as real as physical form, just a different experience. The council via Sarah Landon talks about the dimension of imagination as the sixth dimension. And we first create in our imagination, and then from that creative space from which everything is born, physical form is manifested, physical form is created, physical form is developed. And so commit to what is real at the superficial level talks about, for me, being really present in the moment and letting go of things in the past, things in the future. My mother worries a lot. She creates all kinds of stories of what could happen when I'm not here, if something happens and somebody doesn't respond back to a text message quick enough, and she starts to create stories of, oh, they're angry at me, they're upset at me, what have I done wrong? Oh, how am I going to fix this? And so she ends up creating all kinds of stories, which then affect her of some possible futures. And so we have these incredible gifts of imagination that we use both going backwards and going forwards. And we can do that in the moment and be present in the moment when we are conscious that that's what we are doing. Our past and our future is a part of our experience. It is a part of who we are. There's no denying that. When we get caught up in a story of our past, we are getting hypnotized by that story. We are losing our conscious awareness, and we're losing our broader perspective of interpretation. And our interpretation then becomes hijacked by the energy of the story. And when we are invested in the story and the energy of the story is not a very good feeling energy, it lowers our vibration, it lowers our capacity to interpret life from a broader perspective. We become more narrow focused in our attention and in our interpretations. And we become very prone to misunderstanding our experience. From a three principles perspective, commit to what is real. For those of you from that side, In the three principles conversation, we talk a lot about how our entire experience of life is created by thought. And so, what is real is our experience, which is created inside out, versus our perception of what we are experiencing in the outside world, which is our idea of the outside in. And so, when I lose my patience at my mother is the cause of my upset, is an outside in. And when I am caught up in her story, that's how it feels, that's how it looks. And everything that I've learned over the last number of years helps me to pull out of that more easily so that I can have a broader perspective and recognize it's not her, it's my interpretation, it's my own mood, it's my own energy, it's my state of mind that is contributing to my response, my beliefs, my models of thought that I've created from, my past that help to automate my response to life so that I can live life more easily and with less effort. And unfortunately, these automations are oftentimes created from a misunderstanding. But that's a broader, bigger conversation. So, what is real is inside out. What is not real is our perception of the outside in. Because we can never truly experience the outside world. We can only experience our interpretation of it. And our interpretation of it is always filtered through a number of different models and beliefs that help us to interact with the world. Our personality, our ideas of self, our ideas of others, our ideas of existence all influence our interpretations. So commit to what is real as much as you can. And I myself am still reflecting on what does this mean? What's the relationship here? Now there's a bigger aspect that has come from this conversation, which has been really, really fascinating. And I am going to write an article about this soon. And it's with regard to the three laws of the universe as Abraham Hicks presents them in his book about the law of attraction. And I am going to write about this because I do want to talk about this experience. The first law, the law of attraction, says that which is like unto itself is drawn. The second law, the science of deliberate creation, says that which I give thought to and that which I believe or expect is. The third law, which is the law of allowing, says, I am that which I am, and I am willing to allow all others to be that which they are. And I've been getting a deeper understanding and appreciation for that last one as a result of this heated conversation with my family members and the long response that I have written, which I say I'm likely never going to give them. Because fundamentally, it doesn't matter. They can be upset about things that I did in the past all they want. And I don't need to engage in that story if I don't want to. Now, of course, I'm going to be as respectful to their experience as I can, but I don't need to engage in their story of blame and defensiveness. So they blame me and I become defensive. I blame them and they become defensive, and the emotions escalate. And then we're no longer speaking from a place of expanded awareness. We're speaking from a place that is hijacked by our emotions, which lowers our perspective and it lowers our ability to connect to our truth. And we get caught up in the story. And then the story hijacks our interpretations of the conversation. And I know that I've passed the 30 minutes, so I'm just going to say one last thing. And again, I'm going to write about this shortly as part of this discussion. The council talks about, and I just lost it. Interesting. So I was going to tie in something else that the council talks about with regards to this, which is for me part of the whole conversation. And I just had it to share with you guys. And right now my mind has gone blank. So I will assume that the timing isn't right to share that with you all. So I will share it later. All right. So let's leave it here for now. A little over 30 minutes. Um, Hopefully this is helpful. I'll share more later. The end of my first blog article that kind of kicked this whole thing off, I have a list of topics that I wanted to go deeper into. I may still go into those at some point. So if you're interested in any of those areas, let me know and remind me if I forget. Anyway, I will leave it there for now. Lots of love to you all. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hope it was useful, and I will see you on the next one. I will leave you, as always, with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love. Bye bye.